Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to be back.
Glad to have you here.
So, one of the things that I noticed in my bio is it's not current.
So tell us.
Yeah, so let me just share with you what else I'm up to. I now am the provider of training for all licensed Unity teachers and ministers who have to meet the annual requirement for diversity and inclusion. So that's done virtually, and so that's just expanded my offerings, and folks can call in from around the world, and Unity, as you know, is around the world as well. I will be continuing on under our new spiritual leader. You all know who that is, right? Yeah, Edward Fiyoun. I'll be continuing on with him. We have been working on the Cultural Integration and Evolution Committee since we merged or integrated, if you will, in 2012. And he says, I've got some ideas for how we can really, really bring the two organizations together. Because although we have been joined on paper, there's still some separation in the minds of some people. So our work is not yet done. So I'll be continuing on with that. And then most recently, I've joined the faculty of the Holmes Institute, the Denver campus.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm busy. Honoring the divine feminine in us all. The first thing I want to say is that oftentimes when people hear that, feminine, things come to their mind that we're not really talking about. So let me ask you all, and this is not rhetorical, what comes to mind when you hear divine feminine? Anybody? Goddess, okay? Creation, wonderful. What else? Wholeness, excellent, yes. Nurturing, yeah, those are all wonderful words, but oftentimes people think in terms of sexuality, and that's not what we're talking about. The divine feminine is a principle. And what do we know about principles? That they are unchanging, they're immutable, they are constant. And so today what we want to focus on is we want to think in terms of having a balance between the divine feminine and the divine masculine active in our lives, because both have roles to play. So the theme for the entire year, you all, as you know, is the Holy Reimagined. And so what that means is we get to revisit these concepts, these topics that make up what we call the science of mind, our teaching and our philosophy, and we can bring to it new life and new perspective. So hopefully that's what I will do by focusing on this today. So next slide, definitions, please. Universal, inherent energy. It's an energy, you all, and it's not about, am I acting effeminine? Not that kind of energy. It's a vibration. It's the counterpart to the divine masculine. So there needs to be balance, just like the yin and yang within us. Otherwise, we are overemphasizing one aspect of ourselves and de-emphasizing another. And so just to make it very plain and very simple, in a lot of the research that I've done, the divine feminine simply means love. Ultimately, it is love. The divine masculine is intention. So that's really, really helpful for us to understand that we need to be intentional about our lives and that we need to operate from love. So it's the counterpart to the divine masculine within all humankind that manifests through an individual's thoughts, actions, and beliefs. It's a spiritual, psychological, and archetypal ideal of feminine energy. The highest, most inspiring, and truest expression of love. And lastly, the divine feminine, not cinnamon, So those words that I asked you all to use to describe the divine feminine, here are some other ones. Inspiration. When you think about creation, they go together. Why? Because you have to be inspired to create something. Do you not? To make something from nothing, or to innovate, to make something from something else. So you have to be inspired. So when that is happening within you, that means that the divine feminine is operative within you. It's also sacredness, empowerment, honor, respect, healing, nurturing, peaceful, and there is a connection to Mother Earth. Those are just a few ways in which the divine feminine is described. So my purpose today in sharing what it is that I've come to know about it, and also my beliefs and my thoughts on honoring the divine feminine, is to enable you to grow in spiritual love and wisdom, and to bring forth the fruits and the blessings of such spiritual love and wisdom in your every moment of evolving consciousness. Therefore, let us together plow into your human soul of consciousness, turn it over, get rid of the stones that do not serve your highest good, pull out the weeds of your negative mental, emotional patterns, fertilize your soil of consciousness with ever-increasing faith. Then sow more beautiful seeds born of your evolving spiritual perception and unconditional love. So, how many of you remembered what I shared the last time I was here? I was here last fall. Yeah. Okay, I made an impression.
I remember what you wore. Remember?
Yeah. She focused on what I wore, all right? However, what I did talk about was I talked about our levels of consciousness, remember? And I gave you 6 levels. And then that 6th level of consciousness is when we are so just immersed in the universal consciousness and we operate from that place. Yeah, you remember now, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but as it relates to this idea of the divine feminine. I spoke about each level of consciousness. I spoke about the frequencies, and then what happens at each level of frequency. I talked about the different conditions of existence. And so what I know is that the highest and the lowest vibrational frequencies of consciousness are produced by the highest or the lowest spiritual emotional patterns of consciousness. And these in turn produce conditions in which that consciousness resides. So what? The so what is if we are truly allowing the divine feminine to operate in our life, you think in terms of those wonderful descriptors that I used before, such as peace and love. That's what will be mirrored back to us. That's what those conditions in our lives will look like and will feel like. So it is one of the highest frequencies of vibration, and it's where the more beautiful, harmonious, joyous, and just unequivocal, unconditional love resides. And those who exist in that frequency only know all that is attracted as a consequence of putting out that level of vibration. The higher vibration of consciousness, the more spiritually loving and beautiful are our thoughts, our words. Our imagination is creative and it's on fire oftentimes, thinking of things we've never thought possible. The ideals of beauty and life forms are rising closer and closer to the dimension of universal consciousness when we are living in that space and in that mindset. And it's at that point in our beingness where the frequencies are so high, they're so heightened as to the level of universal consciousness. That's where we get those glimpses, those sparks of the divine. Anybody ever had such an experience? A numinous experience. It's a feeling nature. We know not, where it comes from, at least in our rational minds, but in our souls we know from where it comes. It comes because we are connected to universal consciousness. There are spiritual, scientific, and materialistic reasons why it's imperative that we should devote all of our mental and emotional energies and sensitivities to bringing our actions and reactions into perfect alignment and harmony with unconditional love and divine consciousness. Because our own consciousness frequencies are forever bringing forth those mirrored reflections of the circumstances and their corresponding feeling reactions. On the ladder of emotions, I don't know if you all have ever seen that. It's also referred to the levels of consciousness as espoused by Dr. David Hawkins. Anybody ever see that? Yeah, great. Yeah, I reference him a lot because he deals with this idea of vibratory frequencies and what you can absolutely predict and expect to be made manifest in your life. And so for me, it just is so profound that I think about it constantly. So if I'm vibrating low, then you know what? Self-fulfilling prophecy. I can just expect that I'm going to have some pretty low experiences. So he talks about on that ladder, at the middle you have like some neutral feelings and emotions. And so one might be anger, for instance. Anger, partnered with the divine feminine, means that, you know what, I don't like the situation that I'm in, but I'm inspired to do something different. That's when you're tapped into the divine feminine. However, if you are not tapped into the divine feminine, then you sink to lower levels of vibration. Things like resentment and, that anger just goes more deeply into the negative. It spirals downward. And then, of course, you attract those kind of experiences to your reality as well. So we want to vibe high whenever we are mindful. So when we live comfortably and at ease and harmony with the universal laws of existence, we find that no matter what may be the troubles and the uproar in the world around us, we are nourished, we are healed, we are whole, we are perfect, we are protected, we are cared for, and maintained in perfect peace of mind, as long as we remain in the spiritual frequency of the divine feminine. Furthermore, as you lift your level of consciousness frequencies, you will find that you are inwardly strengthened in spirit and with the life force that is Shakti. And when the opposite occurs in your life, you find yourself entrapped in those vibrations that will take you on that personal descent into those lower frequencies by being emotionally drawn into them. And this happens in a number of ways. It can happen through your own thoughts, your own feeling nature that is the consequence of your thoughts. And that also can happen through your communication, your engagement with other folks who are vibrating at very, very low levels. And what happens then? You might start to experience a loss of energy. Anybody ever just feel exhausted after you've been around somebody who's just so negative? Yeah, you know what that feels like? I mean, you haven't done anything. You're just in their space, and when they leave your company, you're like, wow, I'm exhausted. Well, that's because you are starting to sink to their level of vibration. They've made an impression upon you in some way. And so you might start to sympathize. Sympathize means that you take on that feeling nature. Empathize means I can see it, I can recognize it. But sympathize means I'm feeling it too. And so you start to have that loss of energy, and it starts to deplete your creativity, your problem-solving ability, and you literally lose physical energy in your body. Therefore, when deliberately setting out on a spiritual journey to live your true nature, which is unconditional love, you should visualize yourself as being like a traveler who's boarding a train. And guess where this train is bound for? It's the destination of your choice. You get to choose. But everything that you do in your life, you are either moving forward spiritually, or you're moving into areas of consciousness that are detrimental to your long-term journey towards, and I'm trusting that your destination is higher levels of consciousness, yes? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
The energy of the divine feminine embodies, as I said earlier, the nurturer, the healer, the peacemaker. So there are opportunities for us in life in every moment to step into those roles. You see conflict going on. You can say, not my business. My name is Wes, not in that mess. Or you can be a place of peace. You can stand there and hold the consciousness of peace and send out those vibrations. And guess what? It'll elevate those other folks. And then they start to diffuse those emotions that they're in conflict. So you have opportunities all the time presented. The question is, do you seize those opportunities? And it's not my business. If living in the world and creating a world that works for everyone is something that you aspire to, it is your business. It doesn't mean that you have to engage, become a part of it and try to mediate. I don't suggest that unless you have on, lots of protective gear. Your PPE, as they call it, personal protection equipment. But you can always stand for peace. You can always stand for love. You can always stand for harmony. If you have a feminine essence, then you may love to relate to other people. Anybody just love to be in relationship with other people? Yeah? Well, that is the feminine principle operative within you. If you love to have an exchange of ideas, being respectful of the other person's perspective, really entertaining what it is they have to say, you are activating the divine feminine principle in your life. You may not have thought of it as such. If you like things to be adorned nicely, including yourself, you are activating the divine feminine principle within you. And what this does for us is it deepens the fullness of our existence. So just be with that for me. The fullness of your existence. So do you want to live life half-heartedly? Or do you want to experience the fullness of life? And the fullness of life is not just about always vibing high. I mean, we aspire to that, but then sometimes there are the ups and the downs of life. That's a part of life. And without those experiences, oftentimes we don't grow. We don't stretch. We remain stagnant because we maintain status quo. But if you want to experience the fullness of life and be a victor in living the fullness of life, then you hone that divine feminine principle within you. And living in a fast-paced world that we live in, it's in some ways disconnected us. It's disconnected us from some of the concepts of receptivity and just being present with other people. We don't value life. People just kill people for, things like chicken sandwiches or a place in the line to get one. There's a devaluation of human life. But if you value human life, then you want to make sure that you are in alignment whenever you are mindful with the attributes of the divine feminine. And some of them are what? Inspiration. What else? Love. What else? Peace. What else?
Nurturing.
Wholeness and nurturing. Absolutely. Thank you all for that. So how do we express it? This energy that I'm talking about. How do we make it manifest in our lives and therefore in the world? You honor your emotions is the first thing you want to do. Instead of repressing them. Your emotions don't go away even when you endeavor to squash them. They're still there. They are a source of powerful energy and vitality for you. However, when repressed, they'll either leak out in your relationships as manipulation, maybe even passive-aggressive behavior, or if they go unexpressed for long periods of time, they develop into disease. Trust your intuition. We live in a world that validates logic over emotions. The idea that things don't exist unless we can see them. That's why when you get an intuitive hit, you most often will ignore it instead of acting on it. Have the courage to listen to what your inner wisdom is saying. Act upon it because you have more wisdom inherent in you than you probably realize. And that wisdom is partnering with, and that's the masculine as I talked about, is partnering with that divine feminine. Learning to trust yourself and knowing that what you are feeling and intuiting is not only valid, but is correct for you. Why? Because you're feeling it. You're having the experience. Your intuition is your guiding force. Honor it and obey it. Two other things are ways to express your divine feminine. That's to use your imagination. Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge because knowledge is limited. We only know what we know now. Imagination is endless. And also knowledge are about facts and figures and logic and reasoning. And that is the masculine principle. Imagination moves us into the mystical, the mystery. And when we trust that, when we trust what is unseen, also we are trusting in our own faith. Because that's what faith is. It's evidence of things not seen. Yes? So use your imagination to create a better world for yourself and for others. Your imagination is how you create. Because first you get this incredible idea in your mind, right? You imagine things, and unfortunately the way that we've been socialized, we tend to imagine the worst case scenario. But what we want to do is we want to imagine the best case scenario. What would a world that works for everyone look like? Talk to me. What would it look like? What might it look like? What would be going on? Equality, justice,
cooperation,
community,
Equanimity.
support, equanimity,
communication,
sustainability, limitless joy. Thank you for that. So if you want that world, because it doesn't exist currently, but if you want it to exist, it's real. In your mind, in your imagination. So start using your imagination as your divine feminine tool to bring this goodness into your life and subsequently into the world. Give your inner wisdom a voice. Don't be afraid to speak your truth. We are programmed with the dis-ease to please. afraid to rock the boat, and many of us keep our mouths shut and don't speak up for ourselves, or when we witness injustice towards others, we aren't allies. We probably are thinking, glad it's not me. And I say, but for the grace of God, there go I. So when that happens, when you see injustices, you do nothing. When you don't speak your own truth, when you don't stand up for what you know is right for you, you are disconnecting from your power source. And it keeps you from accessing your divine feminine wisdom. So don't be afraid to process your emotions and give them a voice. Stop acting as though you are powerless, because you are powerful. You may experience an uncomfortable feeling sometimes when you are moving beyond the land of the familiar. What does that mean? Doing something that you've not done before. Showing up in a way that you've not shown up before. Because of the newness of it, it might create a little discomfort. Then just know, the more you do it, the more it becomes habitual. And guess what? It's practice that makes it permanent. So an uncomfortable feeling also means that you have an unmet need, or an unexpressed idea, thought, comment. Therefore, learn how to make yourself important enough to honor your needs. Did you hear that? Elevate yourself to priority status so that you honor your needs, and you also are mindful enough to recognize the needs of others. That's what emotional intelligence is all about. Anyone connected to their divine feminine power knows how to ask for what they need. Have gratitude for life. In the hustle bustle of life, it's easy to forget how special, how sacred, how holy life truly is. But if you have ever had a life-threatening situation, you quickly remember how precious life is. Or if you've lost someone, especially unexpectedly, then you realize how quickly life can be taken away. So don't take it for granted. Live it to its fullest. Be grateful and thankful for every gift of life. And more importantly, the divine feminine is literally and spiritually the life-giving force. That's why it's so often described as creation. It is not something to be taken for granted. It's magical, it's mystical, and it's incredibly special. Take time to honor the life that you've been given. And I implore you to know that the re-emergence of the divine feminine energy offers a desperately needed corrective to the qualities of fear, oppression, greed that have come to define the dominant cultures of our world. Now is a momentous time of change, and our collective destiny hangs in the balance. Honor and give expression to the divine feminine energy inherent in you. You put up the next slide. And so in closing, if you all would stand, I'd like some energy in the room. Affirm this with me with emotion, gusto, and passion. I'll read part of it first and stop and let you read, and then I'll finish it out. I am a being of love and light.